Hello again, everybody. Lee Clements here for NCIS Reports in the Field. Well, we're beginning our fourth year. What a great time. So many great interviews with fantastic people who were part of the history of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Today's show will be dedicated to the outstanding support staff that we have in the organization. I've selected this person because I knew her when I went to headquarters and I worked closely with her when we redesigned credentials for in around 2002, showing the worldwide mission of NCIS. Becky Wagoner is a fantastic person who had an outstanding career with not only NIST, but went on to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, where she retired and then was rehired as an annuitant. Becky's a great person, always had a positive attitude, wonderful lady, and a great representative of those fine support staff who, compared to their contemporaries or counterparts in the private sector, receive lower pay but work just as diligently to make sure that we, the agents in the field, get the job done. I'm excited and I hope you enjoy this show with Becky Wagner. Reports in the field. We've got a special guest today that I'm excited to have on the program. Becky Wagner, who was primarily worked at headquarters with us back in the NIS days into the NCIS days. She has some great stories about working in the travel section as well as security. She was a good friend when I finally transferred there. We were talking earlier before we started this process or program that the agents in the field really don't understand what goes on at headquarters on a daily basis. In fact, as I told her, I said that a lot of agents just think the headquarters is in the way, but until they get transferred there to be a desk officer and see what the good people at headquarters do on a daily basis, then they kind of get the idea of how the soup is made. But anyway, I'm excited to have Becky on the program today. Becky, it's great to see you again. Hope everything is going well in Maryland.
It is. Everything is going good, and thank you, Lee, for including me in this. I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's a big part of the history of the organizations. The organization is more than just agents and more than just analysts. There's administrative side that's a huge positive aspect of the organization. And what we're going to talk about today is the old days of NIS to the days of NCIS and how things changed administratively. Everything from moving from dictaphones to typewriters to computers. It's funny because I was watching the new television show NCIS Origins, and since I started in 1989 and Gibbs started in 1990, I've still got a year on him. So as they say on the show, he's a probie in my life, but I don't think I've ever called anybody a probie, but that's okay. Um, just excited that they're kind of talking about the past. Leon Carroll obviously helps out with that program, the television program, and he does a great job. I think they're doing a really good job on kind of showing what it was like to be an agent and part of the administrative staff at Camp Pendleton back in 1990. So it's really interesting to watch, them to have problems with printers and problems with their one computer in the office, which I find very funny. But anyway, so Becky, tell me about yourself a little bit. Tell me about where you came from, where you were born, and let's talk about a little bit about that.
I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia. I graduated from high school at Amherst County High School in Amherst, Virginia, which was in between Lynchburg and Charlottesville. After that, I moved to Waldorf, Maryland, which I lived for 40 years. But I went to Charles County Community College, now College of Southern Maryland. I went there for 2 years. I did take I took a 3 credits at the University of Maryland right before I joined the government. I came on board in May of 1985. During that time frame, I had applied for several different agencies. There was a freeze going on off and on during that time frame. I was lucky that my dad worked for Naval Intelligence at that time, And that was when we were over in Suitland when we had Nick 1 and Nick 2. He worked over in Nick 2. And they had the same personnel that handled their personnel work. NCIS at that time didn't have their own personnel office. So he just gave my application to Claudette Jones at the time, and she passed it on to Mr. Chevalier, who worked up in security. He was the security manager at that time.
Mhm.
So I went in for my very first interview with NCIS.
So what was that interview like? As far as, because with the agents, we had to go through a pre-screening interview, then a screening board, which lasted about 4 hours. What was it like to be interviewed for an administrative position?
It was very laid back compared to that. It was it was maybe an hour at the most. I sat down with Mr. Chevalier. He had already seen my, it was it wasn't a resume then, it was, I forget what the form was called, but he read over it. And I think even Mary Anderson was in there. She was his deputy at that time, or second person in charge in there, and she became my immediate supervisor. And we just sat down and went over things, and then we started the role on my security clearance, because I had already taken, when you, at that point in time when you worked for the government and you came in as a clerical person, you had to take the clerical test. I forgot what it's called, and you did that at the Census Bureau. They had that test, and for clerical. So once you had to have that to come in there, and I came in as a clerk typist GS3.
So kind of talk about when you came in with the Naval Investigative Service, NIS, before it became NCIS. Can you talk a little bit about how administrative issues were handled at the time? For instance, how reports were sent back and forth to the field, general administrative messages, the gen admins, and then also a little bit about what kind of equipment, when you showed up in Suitland, Maryland at the old Office of Naval Intelligence buildings, what was it? What was the equipment like as far as, was it antiquated? Was it advanced? What was it like?
I had an IBM typewriter on my desk, and I had a telephone that had like a couple buttons that would go to my supervisor or whatever that you clicked, and you have a couple lines,
Yeah.
and the one that you do like this. Well, not the, I don't even think
No,
it's
was
the
it,
touch
you
button.
actually had the rotary phones?
Yeah, I think it was the rotary phone. I really do. I really do, if I recall correctly. Um,
Yeah.
and we had a very small office, and we were right across from the front office.
Mm.
And the coffee mess was right across from me. And we also had military personnel in our office. And I remember the very first agent I met was Peter Riley. And I didn't even know he was an agent. And he would come in, he would talk, very pleasant, very nice. And I've been friends with him my whole career. So
Yeah.
that was very nice. And I didn't even know for probably years that he was an agent, because I knew he was in the front office and I knew he was an attorney. That's all I knew at that time.
That's right. Now, who was the director at the time, or what they call the assistant director? Because at the time we had an admiral or a captain running the organization when you came
But
in, right?
Captain Toll was there when I first got there, and then Admiral Flynn came in.
Captain Flynn. Okay.
Yeah, Admiral Flynn was very when when you retire, you go back and think of what was the most important thing that happened in your career.
Mhm.
And one of the first things that happened to me, we had I was going down the hall, and one of the new ladies that was checking in, because when you came on board, you had to check through security at that time.
Mhm.
And she was with when we first started with shoot Don Cap. We started getting we had Don Cap. We had to check those employees in. Well, she was coming down the hall and she was choking on a hot dog she had for breakfast.
Oh no.
And I was coming down the other end of the hall. So I did the Heimlich remover. And of course it worked. So about a month or so later, Admiral Flynn called me into his office. And, you like called me into his office. It's like I was like, oh boy, what did I do? But
Yeah.
I received an award for saving her. So that
Oh,
was
that's
pretty
awesome.
much that's something I really, felt like they should think he was fine. But I thought that was an honor and very nice. And that pretty much was probably the most important award because that was, significant and the impact of saving someone and helping someone out who was in
That
need.
is so cool. That is really cool, Becky. So, the the Heimlich maneuver. Was you taught that before you came into the organization? How did you learn the Heimlich maneuver?
Well, when I was in college, I wanted to be a rec major.
Okay.
So you took all the health, I took swimming and all those courses and stuff. And through my career, even when I went to work for the FBI, I took the CPR and all that to stay in tune with all that because you never know.
Well, that's interesting. So, tell me about some of the people that you got a chance to work with when you first got there that were influential in your career, or how you kind of continued after that the
Okay.
opposite seal.
Well, I came on board in 1985, and between 85 and 87, I worked in several different codes departments. I
Mhm.
went to 27, I was in code 22 briefly, and then I went to code 25, who eventually became code 10.
Right.
And that's where I found my niche in the world. And when I
So,
first went, okay, go ahead.
so code 25, I mean, just for the people listening out there at the time, so they know a lot of the people listen with NCIS know that code 10, what that is as far as career services, but that was code 25 back in the day was career services and also transfers and things like that. And then code 27, what was code 27?
That was code 15. It was the computers communications.
Wait a minute, we had computers in
We had
1985.
we had they did the I don't know what it's called, the massive the computer room, the
Okay.
computer room, wherever, whatever. I never worked in there. I was a secretary. I was
Yeah,
Mr. Palmer and Mr. Boyce's secretary.
okay.
Now, the first time I became a secretary, Mr. Palmer was a special agent,
Yeah.
and I think he was a radio man or something like that. But I worked back there with that, and that was also when Mr. Lanham was back there.
Oh, Charlie Lanham. Okay, very good.
Yes, he was one of my favorite people. He ended up in Code 10 um, toward the end of his career before he went to the front office.
Right. So what
Yeah.
was so Charlie Lanham, a legend in the organization, who eventually become the director. Talk a little bit about some of those days working in career services with Charlie Lanham and those guys, all the people we worked in. But now, had Charlotte Lawless, were you working with Charlotte back in the day in career
I
service?
didn't work. I didn't work in travel per se, but travel was part of our office.
Okay.
When I first came on board into Code 10, I was still just a clerk typist, and the main thing I did were credentials. And at
Okay.
that point in time, when I first started doing them, that's when they combined them to where I did the creds, the badges, and the protective service pens.
All
The
right.
badges were done in 28. The secretary did those at that
Mhm.
time, which was part of security. So they combined all of that. And then we consolidated all of that. And that's when we started keeping your creds and your badges that you were issued in the past. So I pretty much initiated all of that. And from 87 to the day I walked out the door, most of the time, I mean, there were years where I didn't do creds and then I came back around
Sure.
to me,
Sure.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But and we developed it to where instead of me type at that time, I typed them on the typewriter. So if I made a mistake, I had
Yeah.
to redo it. Or
Yeah.
if I sent it out and spelled your name wrong. But that happened a lot too, because a lot of people either didn't want the junior on there or whatever. It's something or like
Well,
a,
so I
like
remember
our
one
late
agent that I think he wanted PhD on there or something.
Oh, I'm sure. And like a lot of our ladies that, when the ladies get married, their last name changes. So we have
Sure.
different stuff like that
Right.
occurred. And then it's like, at that time, it's like every 5 years, you should get a new picture. So that was
Mhm.
a new credential at that time. And then I was the one that first started working with a company that did everything digital and computer wise,
That's
where
right.
we had it in the computer and format it to where I can print it out there. And we designed our own creds
Yeah.
where we left the Bureau of Engraving and Printing
Right.
and designed our own creds. We did the hologram and all those different things to make it security wise. And that company is pretty much has the monopoly on it because the
That's awesome.
FBI uses the same vendor. And I noticed because I've been doing creds forever, the creds I had from the background investigative position I had,
Hmm.
same thing, same principle, the same company, most likely. And
Interesting.
yep, and it's the badges, of course, changed over the years because our name changed.
Hmm.
We had the silver badges for just plain investigator.
Hmm.
We had the agent badges for the reservist. Um, that that was a big key, and also like the protective service pins changed
Right.
over the years. So we saved all of that, and I did do a little homework on my career and went back to see some work I did. I did before I left 1,000 shadow boxes in my career, and
Wow.
I worked a lot with S&W engravers. Um, now, revolving since I left, and it was starting before I left. The shadow boxes have really improved because it's so much talent out there. And I think
Mhm.
from what I've heard, they pretty much let the agents design their own if they want
Yeah.
to, which
Yeah.
is
In
a good
fact,
thing.
so when I retired, they just handed me all my credentials and badges and pins and said, "Oh, here you go." So I
I
had to go. Jay, one of my ASAC at the time, Jay Doyle, went there and they basically chipped in the office and purchased the shadow box for me, which was really nice for them to do. But they basically he designed it and with my input, and but that was really nice. It's interesting because when we go back in the history of the Office of Naval Intelligence, that the idea of providing credentials and shadow boxes was something that FDR, uh, President Roosevelt, before he was president, he was Secretary of Navy, and one of the contract agents at the time after World War I wanted some back pay for working in the organization because they basically terminated everybody after World War I that was doing counter-espionage, counterintelligence. So the secretary, Roosevelt, basically came up with an idea. Okay, well, we'll give you your credential and we'll stamp it retired. And so that tradition is continued to this day, which is really
yeah,
cool. You were part of that.
yes. But ironically, this background job I had, if I were to lose my creds and my badge, I would have to pay $2,000. Can you imagine me telling you as an agent, I need $2,000?
No. Well, I know there's been plenty of people who have lost their creds, so they should pay up then.
I do have some funny stories in that regard of people like leaving them on the top of their vehicle and
Oh
driving
yeah.
off. Even like when someone puts their badge and creds in their coat in the and when they're on the airplane and putting their coat on in the thing upstairs and then
Yep.
leaving it up there.
Hmm.
And I think somebody lost it when they were going onto a bus on in DC somehow when they
Oh
were
man.
on the bus, their cred fell out or something or another. But different odd stories like that.
I we used to call it the chest pat. Are my creds there? Are my creds there? Yeah, you're always
Yes.
checking where your creds were. And I'm sure you did the same thing when you were a background investigator, but it's really interesting
Yes.
because I've seen, guys that had lost their creds. And of course, when you lost creds, there's like a mini 2B or something. They have to, a 2B is an internal investigation just to make sure that, and of course, nobody likes to be involved in those things. But it's interesting that you brought that up because I can remember, in the old days, NIS days, of if you left your creds out on your desk, something was going to happen to them. In other words, somebody was going to change the picture inside the credential. So, there might be a, so you pull up to the Navy, the gate guard looks at it and kind of gives this strange look on his face. Like, what? And it's like somebody had pictured a really ugly, picture of somebody that's out of the Appalachia
Right.
credential. I don't know if they had that in DC, but we had that a lot in San Diego.
I heard stories of that.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, so how long did you spend from 85 to 80, 87? You were in security, right? Or did you?
Well,
You said you moved around, right?
I moved around a couple times. I was only in 20, well, it was 28 by then in security. Only a short time because I wanted a promotion to GS4. But that was when we had a freeze going on. So when I went to be Mr. Palmer's secretary, I split my time between, like, I would spend either the mornings in 27 and the afternoons in 28, or vice versa, or one day here, one day there. And then shortly after, I stayed in, I, the only time I left was if I applied for a higher grade to a position. So when I went to 22, it was for a GS6 and or 5. It probably was a 5. And then I ended up back in back because they were reorganizing code 28 with 25. They were moving some of the staff over because I believe, if I'm not correct, well, because personnel used to be under 28 and then they moved it to 25. And that's when that all combined together. When the position that I ended up in at the later part of my career was the one that Mr. Catella had back in the day when we were over in Suitland. He did he took care of all the agents. When I was in Code 10 for, I guess, the last probably, I guess, almost 10 years, I would think, that I can't remember the time range of that. But before I left in 2008, I did everything in regards to the agent corps once they came on board. I maintained your personnel file. I filed all your PARs. I made sure that your physicals were done on time, and I kept a record of that. I did the promotion boards. I did the credentials. I did your outside employment type of thing. Anything that pertained to agent or agent policy, because we have the NIS one on the book where we changed the we go over the different policies. I wrote the policy for the credentials, all of that, and some administrative work. But I also at between the time I did creds as a clerk typist, I became the secretary, the department secretary in there. When you're in the clerical field, it's really hard to get out of it. So when I was in there as the secretary, I was Mr. McPherson was in there, and Mr. Miller, Mr. Nance was in there, Mr. Lanham was in there. I think I came in there right after Mr. Lanham left. I was in there when I was Mr. Brandt's secretary for a short time too. He was only in our department for a very short time. It was right when he first got his 15. Then I I took a downgrade to get out of the clerical field. So I took a 6, and that's when I started doing mainly the agent corps stuff.
Right.
And then they gave me the credentials back to do. And that's, and I, to be honest, I really enjoyed it. I liked what I did. I liked, the one regret I had in both agencies that I worked for is I didn't work in the field. So whenever your PARs came in, especially like, okay, I know Lee. Let me see what he did this year. So I would read them, And
Oh boy.
when
Oh boy. It's a wonder that guy ever got promoted.
And then, like, when you go to the promotion board, you have to
Yeah.
go back like 3 or 4 pars or whatever,
Sure.
and you have to make sure there's no gap in the pars. So I would read them, so I would know pretty much a lot of what our agents did, and I learned more about our agent corps, and that I enjoyed that because where I worked, my boss changed every 2 years,
Sure.
which that was kind of tough because it's like I was training my boss over and over again to what we're doing, and that was okay.
Yeah.
But I had some really good bosses that trained me to do different things differently and better in the computers and stuff because they had that training to do stuff with the computers and stuff that I hadn't, and a lot of the time I got some good. Um, I was able to go to get some good classes too, so that advanced my career. And I give a lot of credit to my career at NCIS when I finally decided to leave the agency. And we talked about this before. The sad part of being in the professional staff, there are higher grade levels for us, but they're smaller. There's not enough of them to go around, and it's very competitive. But the one thing I liked when I did leave, and we talked about this before, is the management and program analyst position, because you can go from a GS3 all the way to an SCSer in that series.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have specialized experience, because I was a MAPA there, even though I worked in HR, but I wasn't a specialist. And I didn't have to be, but I still had the same training, and I could compete wherever I went for that HR position. But that's the only thing that I think that really NCIS should, and I know that maybe they have, because I've been gone for 16 years now. So that's a big gap, almost as long as I've been there. But it was like, that's something they really need to look at, because there's a lot, when I was there was a lot of really good, talented people that worked really hard, and the grades just not were there. Luckily, when I was employed, we were dedicated. We stayed at one agency. I would not have left. I would not have left if I was promoted up. I wanted to, after you're there for like 23 years, that's where you want to retire.
Yeah.
But also I had to be able to retire. So it was like, either here or there. But I have a great respect. And even when I left NCIS, the FBI had awesome, great respect rapport with NCIS, which made me feel good.
Yeah.
So I had the
Well,
best of both worlds.
It's so interesting because you brought up a good point there, that's one of the challenges that we continue to have at NCIS today is um, the administrative series and all administrative series and the ability to get promoted up in their series. You start off as a GS5, you end up as a GS7 in some cases, or you start off as a GS7 and end up as maybe 11 or 12, a 12 if you're lucky. And so that's one of the major issues we have right now, because we have some really talented people who, are basically field office support officers that are GS13s, but probably should be a 14 level because of the amount of people that they manage on a day-to-day basis, the kind of work that they're doing. It's a lot of juggling goes on in those positions. And you find that the people that are in there, they're fantastic people who are very flexible at what they do and how they do business. We were very lucky this time to have guys like you at the organization that was there. It had kind of that memory of what we've done, over time.
Right.
Now we always say that there's a corporation out there that's going to hire one of these people in a second if they get their hands on them. It's like the cyber industry. Anybody that's in cyber now in government, could leave government and triple their salary. And I think that's the same way for administrative staff. They could probably double their salary.
If I had, when I retired, I had a lot going on. My parents' health was an issue. I could have made more as a contractor when I retired. Um, but I would have stayed longer if I had retired in the government. I probably would have gotten a 14. I did retire at the 13 level, which I never thought I would see. And my dad retired as a 13. So I felt honored and I felt good that I made it that far.
Good.
But the thing is, okay, it always happens when you leave. They posted my job as a 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
That always happens when you leave.
That's right.
but but it is what it is. But hey, I yeah, I was talking to I retired, but I'm going back to do background investigations again with another agency if everything works out. And I was interviewed earlier this morning, and I
Mm-hmm.
told them it's like you look back at your career and you're going through, and it seems like when can I retire? I want to retire. Then when you retire, it's like not what I do because I've done a lot because I took care of my mom
Yep.
and I had a house built. I had I had two homes at one time. I had a basement that flooded. You have a lot of things that are going on. You think that when you retire, it's all this fun, la la time, but you still have life going on beside
Yeah.
around you. But
Yeah.
you really do miss being productive. Um, I don't want my brain to go marshmallow, but but it's
Yeah.
like
Sure.
it's like I feel very good because I really like where I'm at because I'm near my daughter, who my daughter grew up at
Mm-hmm.
NCIS, and she became a police officer, and
Mm-hmm.
she has her master's in criminal justice. I mean, law enforcement or criminal justice, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But she's doing very well. Um,
Does she have any interest in coming on as an agent at the NCIS?
Well, now she's aged out right now because my
Oh,
daughter's getting older too. But
okay.
I asked her over and over, and she had that. It was her plan. That's what she
Mm,
wanted to do. But my daughter is like me. We don't like moving around a lot. We like our roots where
yeah,
we're
I hear
at,
you.
pretty much. Although they probably may relocate. My grandson's in college right now, and I live near the water, and he grew up around the water all his life.
Mhm.
Now he likes the mountains. I grew up around the mountains, and I have no desire to go back. but but his college is in the mountains, so he likes that area. So they may retire near him there. So that she'll move then. But it's amazing how things change because Secret Service was looking at my daughter, and
Mhm.
the FBI also was looking at her. So she had a lot of opportunities. But I asked her before she turned 37 because I still had some sources to help her out with.
Sure.
But she's doing very well. She's in charge of her office. Everybody likes her. She volunteers for everything.
Right.
I won't say exactly where she works for, they're in charge of the bridges, the airports, and the tunnels. And she's in charge of the new bridge.
Mhm.
And she just took a test for um, to be promoted. So she's doing very well. My
Good.
grandkids are doing well. My grandson's a pitcher, so I can't wait till baseball season starts.
That's awesome.
but but
Well,
my granddaughter keeps me busy because she likes everything, and I'm her taxi in the morning to school. So I'm lucky that I'm around them. So it's
that's
really
right.
good. And I couldn't. I live near Dahlgren base. I couldn't travel from here to DC,
Yeah,
but
that's a
I
long
really,
drive.
yeah, I have no qualms about going back to DC. I haven't even gone back since I left, but this is a beautiful area where I live. I have great neighbors where I live. So I feel very blessed and very lucky. I was lucky. My nose is running. I was lucky to have my mom with me 15 months before she passed away,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
my mom passed away in her sleep. So it was very peaceful, and she was over 90, so she lived a full life. So it was good for us because it was all during COVID, and she didn't know anything, about what COVID meant, and she didn't understand. But it was good for us to reconnect, and I feel, I think everybody should take care of their parents, and I can sleep at night knowing that I did because they took care of me and raised me. So
That's really important. That's really important.
it is. It is. But the history of NCIS, there's a lot of people that have been there for years that know a lot of history. Like we were talking about the beginning of the computer systems and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that know the history of who was in charge and what was done the other way and what the policies are and the protocol, how to change things. There's so
Mhm.
much history there. It's really amazing. And
Well, let me
that's,
ask you this, Becky, as far as because I mean, you were part of the organization when it moved from Suitland over to the Navy Yard, and at the Navy Yard, you moved several times and within the Navy Yard, right? I mean, at least a couple of times, because I know that you guys were there on the second floor, or third floor, second floor, I believe, third floor, no, second floor, and
second floor.
at building, was it building 100 or
Where was our headquarters building at?
I just
It
I
was,
it was right next to the museum. And then you guys
yes,
moved over above Navy Federal, the credit
yes.
union.
Yes. And I heard they're building a new Navy Federal Credit Union. They're tearing down the parking garage that was across from where, and I heard McDonald's isn't there anymore, where the McDonald's and where
That's all that
DC
government contractor
headquarters.
money that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah, they're redoing a lot of changes.
Well, it's funny because moving that many times, I mean, that's a pain in the neck. As we all know, having to move to a different building. Did you move down to Quantico when they went down to Quantico, or
Yeah.
were you out by that time?
I was out by that time.
Okay.
I left, yeah, I left right before they moved. Um and I didn't leave because of the move. I left because of a promotion. But
Yeah.
I would have driven there. A lot of people did and are still driving from Maryland there. So
Yeah. Are they driving? Now you're down by Dahlgren, so you would just go across the bridge and just come over through Fredericksburg, right?
yes, but I
Yeah.
didn't live here until I only lived here last 5 years. I didn't move here until I retired.
Right. Well, that's interesting. So, you saw a lot of change in the organization. What do you think were some of the most um, significant changes during your time with the organization that you witnessed?
I think it was maybe when Mr. Nedra became our director because he came from outside of
Mhm.
NCIS. I think that was a significant change. Um, I think after 9/11, the changes of security during that time frame, I think that was a significant time too. Um, I I think those were the biggest changes that I recall mostly.
Yeah. So but talk about some of the people that you got a chance to work with. Because I mentioned Charlotte Lawless. I know she was always kind of a legendary type figure there at Code 25. What about some of the other people that we worked with?
Well, I worked with Mary Banks Cox. I
Yep.
worked with Carla Pinto, who's still there.
Yep.
Um, I worked with,
I think Carla's actually over at Army CID now.
no, she's still in Code 10.
She because I used to deal with Carla with interns, and I think
Oh,
she took a job with Army CID now. She's at headquarters. Well, just same building. She moved
headquarters.
across the hall.
Okay.
Yeah. But she's
Yeah,
got a better job now. I think she's making good money now.
yeah, she's doing good. I worked with Donna Green until she left.
Yep,
She was the head of Code 10.
sure.
Um, I worked with let's see, one of my last agents was Mario Palomino. He was
Sure. Mario
he
knows
was
very well.
Mario. He was one that taught me a lot, computer wise and system wise.
Yeah, he's a
He
smart guy.
was very, very, very good with computers and all. Very down to earth, very good boss.
Hmm.
Um, and I worked with Mike Battle. He was
Oh,
one of
wow.
our bosses in there. Um,
Hmm.
Greg Monroe was one of my bosses.
Yep.
David Black was one of my bosses in there. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
Dave is part of our chapter here in Arizona. Um,
yes.
so hopefully he'll be coming up for the Christmas party. We have that 3 meetings every year, and the one in Christmas is always one of our big ones.
He's a prankster too.
He is. He definitely is.
Yeah, he had this mouse that he would try to scare us with. Well,
Uh-huh.
I took the mouse and I locked it in my safe, and he didn't have the combination, so that took care of the mouse. He goes, "Are you going to give me back the mouse?" I go, "No."
Oh my gosh.
But he scared us so much. It's kind of ironic. He scared us so much with this fake mouse that when Greg Monroe came in after him, we
Uh-huh.
were in Mike Battle's office, and there was these bookcases, and there was a real mouse on the bookcase. And Carly was behind me, and we were trying to explain to Carl that that was a real mouse. She didn't believe me, so she takes this pencil to the mouse, and I thought she was going to jump over over a second back. I was like, oh my gosh, but it was a real mouse. But yeah, David was a very much a prankster, but he was fun to work with.
That's great.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
good people, a lot of good agents.
Yep.
And the one thing I liked about my job is like, since I dealt with the agent corps and like trying to get things ready for the boards and stuff, I
Hmm.
talked to a lot of agents in the field. Um, One of my favorite bosses and people was Larry Farrell
Oh, he's a great guy.
because he came back as a FOSO, so
Mhm.
he knew both sides of the spectrum as an agent and as a support professional staff.
Right.
And Larry was a very good man. He passed away a month before my dad did.
Yeah,
Very
way
good,
too soon.
good man.
Yeah, way too soon. Larry designed
Yeah.
the office here at Camp Pendleton and was the
Okay.
FOSO out here for a period of time before he died.
Yeah. Good man. Good
Oh
man.
yeah. And see, I remember Larry when I first came in, he worked at the NISRO. They called him NIS regional office back then,
Uh huh.
with the regional director, and he was one of the SARDOs. They call him the special agent to the regional director, and he was this really interesting guy. You know, you could go in and talk to him as an older agent, and when he retired, I think he got it was kind of interesting because in those days agents always wore suits and ties. You know, it was never, you know, it's not like today you can't find anybody wearing a suit anymore. But in those days, with the suit and ties, and he retired, he came back to the field office there. We'd changed over from NIS to NCIS, and we were no longer doing the region thing. We were in the field office. And he came on board because I think he was getting ready to take the job up at Camp Pendleton, and he had an earring in his ear, wearing like a surfer shirt, and
Yeah.
we were like, "Boy, things have really changed with you, sir." What a great guy, though. Wonderful
Yeah,
guy.
I went to one of the NCIS reunions
Hmm.
before I retired to not before I left in San Diego to do the credentials.
Hmm.
And when I saw Mr. Farrow, he said that he's been surfing, he's been surfing and all this kind of stuff. And I saw a picture that his daughter had posted of him on a surfboard. So good guy, good guy.
Yeah, he became a California surfer dude after he
Yeah,
retired.
yeah. And he, in fact, he was the one that hired me into code, what was code 25 at that time. So whenever we would talk and stuff, he goes, I take credit for hiring you. So he was a very good man.
Was there any other thoughts that you have about your time with NIS? Because I know that you left NIS and you went on to do contract background investigations. Who did you left NIST to go NCIS to go to where?
I went to the FBI.
Okay.
I worked in our ITB office, our Information Technology Branch office. Um, I I was there 3 days shy of 9 years, and I knew maybe 5 agents
Hmm.
the whole time I was there. I worked mainly with support staff. In our office, I have one favorite FBI agent who, every time he would run into an NCIS agent, he would come to me and goes, Becky, do you know? but he was a very good, very caring agent. He was one of my favorite people.
Were you working
Um,
over at Buzzards Point?
no, no, I worked at headquarters
Okay.
in DC for a short time, and
Okay.
then they transferred us to Crystal City. And then
Okay.
I think now Amazon is in control of that area right now, where our building was over there, but it was at an offsite spot. Um, the commute became a nightmare at that point in time because I was taking a bus from Waldorf to DC, which that was fine. It let us out right in front of the building. But then when we moved, I had to get on the metro, and then I had to go for a long walk. So the last 4 years, I think it was the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I drove because it just became too much. And then, of course, you're stuck in. It would only take me 20 minutes. Normally, it took me 2 hours, with the traffic and all to get to work and outside of work, and that's a shame. But I really did. That was my dream job because it was like putting all my specialties together, and I was doing what I love, which was
That's great.
HR and stuff. And I was in charge of the internship program, and I did the hiring and I did backgrounds, which enabled me to do background investigations, which I'm doing now. I did a lot of the interviews for the promotions and stuff, and I worked with the top people. I went to
Mhm.
I My boss was a 15, and I was a 13 setting in for a 15 a lot of the times. So I worked with a lot of the higher ups. I was in one office with one of our second person in command, and we were talking, and he knew Mr. Brandt. So it was like, it's a lot of interaction there. And I even ran into a couple of our agents at NCIS in our building while I was there too. So then I really liked working in the Hoover building because there's a lot of history there. So it's just amazing to be there. And at lunchtime to be able to go and be a tourist for, 30 minutes was fun too. So it's like, it was really a good fit for me at that time. And the advancement was good. I met a lot of good people that I keep in touch with. But it seems like once you work for NCIS, especially for a long time, it's like it's in your blood for life. So you're still connected. But I really do give my time and my experience at NCIS a lot of credit for me having the opportunity to move up and move out. So that's really, I feel very lucky. It's funny when you're going through all this, it's hard, and it's like you have a supervisor sometimes that you don't see eye to eye with, and it's like it's tough. But then once you've made it through all those times and you've learned all this stuff and you've met all these people that are from all over the world. I know even now, like if I went to Arizona, if I need anything, you guys are there. It's like that you have all
That's
these
right.
contacts with all these people, that they're part of your life for your whole lifetime. So
Yeah.
that's a very good feeling. And I met a lot of very good people, both military and the agent corps and support people that are very dear to me.
Well, I'll tell you, you hit the nail right on the head right there. It's a small family. It's a small area. I mean, DC is rather big, but it's can be small as well because the community that you worked in obviously had that interconnection. So it's, you know, I say the same thing. You know, my time at NCIS really kind of modeled, you know, as I look back, and the things that I did and the people that I worked for is precious to me. So it was a great experience. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about your time at NCIS and NIS and all the people and the things that you got a chance to be involved in.
Thank you for having me, Lee. I appreciate it.
Well, listen, it maybe we'll see it someday at an NCIS reunion.
Well, I'm thinking about coming to Colorado.
Oh, it's beautiful. You'll like it if you do.
Yeah, because I really like Joyce Morris. We're good friends, so I
That's a
would
good
love to
lady.
see her.
Good people. Yep.
Yeah, or if I don't, then she said that 2 years from there, it's supposed to be in Florida, so we'll see. One of those two.
Sarasota is pretty easy to get to, so that'd be a nice place to go to as well.
Yeah, I really miss you and Kathy. It's nice having you when you were at headquarters.
Well, like I said, you made being at headquarters a pleasure, not, you know, you were some of the people that we enjoyed. I mean, if I ever went into the services like 25 or code 10, I was always looking for the peeps that I knew. You know, I knew you and I knew Charlotte and I knew a couple other people. And it was always, you know, I'm going to check in with you to see how things are going. And of course, when you start off the credential, you know, as being part of the team that helped design the Dave Brandt, you know, worldwide credential, which was an amazing experience in that. And you were the one that were making all those credentials up and sending out to the people. So I want to, you know, appreciate your service to your country. I appreciate your service and time to NCIS, and it was great having you on the program today. So I wish you well, and I hope to see you at a reunion soon.
Hope so too, Lee.
Well, it was great having Becky on the show. She's a wonderful lady and a great representative of that support staff out there that does a great job on a daily basis to get no accolades, but make us agents look good every day. I want to thank everyone for listening. Like and subscribe. Leave your comments below. This is retired Special Agent Lee Clements for NCIS Reports in the Field. We'll see you next time.